this up-to-the-minute regional and local news from the KBK Central Newsroom. Funeral services will be held tomorrow for a member of one of Keene's first family. Harry Thayer Kingsbury, 92 years old, of 202 Court Street, died yesterday at Elliott Community Hospital after a brief illness. Mr. Kingsbury was born in Keene and attended Dean Academy and Harvard University. He leaves his sons, Edward J. Kingsbury and Chester L. Kingsbury, who operate the Kingsbury Machine Tool Corporation.
When I think Kingsbury, automatically I think transportation toys.
If you look at movies of traffic in Keene at the turn of the century in the early 1900s, you'll see trolleys that are similar to Kingsbury trolleys. You'll see horse-drawn vehicles that are similar to Kingsbury toys, and you'll see cars that are similar to Kingsbury toys.
It tells the entire story of transportation history in the country for 50 years.
In 1736, as the Massachusetts colony began to become overpopulated, some 60 intrepid settlers carved a village out of the trees in the shadow of Mount Monadnock. Situated on an ancient lake bed surrounded by hills, the valley with fertile meadows was excellent for farming.
In the early 1800s, Keene was still largely agricultural. The first settlers had come here to be farmers. And they settled first on the level area that is still Main Street today, because that was the area that was best for farming on the old glacial lake bed.
With the Ashwellet River providing water power, the region soon took on a different flavor.
There were small mills beginning to appear. Grist mills and sawmills came in first, making use of the raw material, all of the wood that they removed from the area to create their farms. By the middle of the 1800s, we were beginning to see more larger scale manufacturing, larger mills, and especially with the arrival of the railroad in the 1840s. Keene was becoming more industrialized.
After the railroad arrived in 1848, Keene became a manufacturing center for woodenware.
Woodenware is any product made out of wood. So you've got buckets and pails and chairs. So they were building machines that would make the pieces that would go into these various products. So they were foot-powered mortising machines. They made saw rigs to go into sawmills. They made large-scale planing machines that would prepare the wood to manufacture these additional products. Some of the first large-scale woodenware machine manufacturing was done in Keene. Some of these pieces were invented here and manufactured here. Edward Joslin was involved in that with a fellow named J.A. Fay, who was one of the first manufacturers of such equipment. Edward Joslin was originally from Stoddard. He was, I believe, the 14th child of a family of 14 children, and he came into Keene probably to find work and get off the farm. He was very involved in manufacturing here, apparently a mechanic of sorts, and was very interested in mechanical things.
Into this industrial revolution came Dennis B. Piper, a farmer's son from nearby Peterborough.
Dennis Piper was the fellow that really began everything that built up to the Wilkins and Kingsbury toy companies. He was a farm boy, born on a farm there, but apparently didn't care for farming too much. He also was very mechanically inclined, and by the time he was in his 30s, he had moved to Keene, and he was also involved in manufacturing and inventing and producing products. He made sewing machine shuttles, but he also made guns, he made locks, and he repaired all of those things. By 1877, he was producing his own foot treadle sewing machines here in a shop on Mechanic Street in Keene. In 1882, he took out a patent on a clothes wringer that was an improvement on what had been done previously. Some of the mechanics of it made it easier and more effective. These are the clothes wringers that had two wheels. You would run your clothes through them, and you would turn the crank, and you would flatten the water out of the clothing as they went through. So he got several patents for wringers. He was producing 3 different wringers by 1885 in his shop here in Keene. In 1885, he started a partnership with a fellow named James Wilkins, the Triumph Ringer Company. So they were making clothes ringers here in Keene, and they were selling them throughout the area and beyond. James Wilkins is a fellow who had an interesting history. We don't know a lot about him, and we don't know how he arrived in Keene, but he married a member of the Colony family, Mary Colony, and the Colony family, of course, had been in Keene for generations. And soon his brother-in-law, Fred Colony, was also a partner in the company.
Colonies are a huge local family, and their money came primarily from woolen mills.
By 1887, Colony and Wilkins had taken over the company, and they were operating it, and Piper left town. So they were using his clothes wringer experience and making his clothes ringers. Somewhere along the way, the men who were making the clothes ringers, they made either a scale model or a salesman's sample, perhaps. It's an exact replica in a very small size of their clothes wringer. And they took those on the road to show the storekeepers what they were trying to sell. And interestingly enough, the small scale or the salesman's model became more popular than the full-size clothes ringers. That was the beginning of the Wilkins Toy Company, with James S. Wilkins as one of the partners, obviously. And in addition to the clothes ringers, they began to make things such as wagons and trains. And these were cast iron toys that they were making in the factory here in Keene on Myrtle Street. And they made some fire engines and cast iron battleships early on. So they were making transportation toys in addition to their clothes wringer. And these were quite popular. Soon they were shipping out tons of these toys.
By 1889, the company was shipping as much as 27 tons of toys a week and was running nights just to try and keep up with demand.
I see a lot of plantation wagons made by Wilkins. A lot of the farm, not only the lawnmowers and the sickles and the hay mowers, they made a lot of farm implements. They made tractors.
There are certain toys in the Wilkins line that are highly desirable because they're rare. The farm toys would be in that category. There are a series of horse-drawn farm toys, and Wilkins made 4 different ones. A tedder, a hay rake, a hay mower, and another one that skips my mind because I don't have it. Once I have it, it'll never skip my mind again.
The detail was incredible, and they did everything per scale. So when you look at a Wilkins farm toy, you can actually say you're looking at the real deal, because that's how close they were in detail.
The Wilkins horse-drawn vehicles were never motorized. But that's not to say they didn't have action, because they did. One of their big innovations was horses that could be detached. So you would just kind of pull a little bit on the harness mechanism, and you could take the horse off and put him out to pasture and have your wagon sitting there while you had your picnic, and then you could hook up and drive home. So that was an innovation, as far as I can tell, that it was a big selling point.
Wilkins was indeed a successful company. They stopped making full-size clothes ringers eventually, and they turned entirely to toy manufacture. Even though they were making and selling a lot of toys, they ran into some financial difficulty in the 1890s when there was a nationwide depression, and they had some economic difficulties keeping the firm going. So they looked for someone to help bail them out with the toy company and to put some money into it. And they took a partner, young H.T. Kingsbury, who got involved in the toy company, and he invested in it, and quite soon he took over the company and began running Wilkins Toy Company by himself.
He got the money to start Kingsbury Toys, or to buy Wilkins, from his grandfather, which is Edward Joslin.
I think probably Mr. Joslin saw something of himself as a younger man in his grandson, both being interested in manufacturing and production and using ingenious methods to create new products to sell. H.T. Kingsbury was a very young man. He had come back from college and began a small bicycle repair shop in his family's garage, and he got involved in some local manufacturing and production, and he was very mechanically inclined as well. He also borrowed money from his grandfather to purchase a company that had burned and gone out of business, the Clipper Machine Works, which made mowing machines they were agricultural, full-scale mowing machines that were used around the country. It was actually quite a well-known company. And the company burned down, the factory burned down. So H.T. went to them and asked if he could purchase the remaining equipment and mowing machines that they had on hand. He did that, realizing that the farmers who were using these all around the country were going to need parts, and they were going to come to Keene and try to find those. So for years he kept selling those.
At the bike shop, Kingsbury invented and patented many devices for the use of cycle repairers, makers, and dealers. These various devices and machines included the Keene Universal Repair Jack, the Wheel Assembly Chuck, the Keene Frame Straightener, the Keene Crank and Axle Straightener, and the semi-automatic rim drill.
I find this machine elegant. Working on it was like working on a bicycle. You can see it's sparse, elegant, efficient, artistic, and it also harkens to an era which is long gone, where shops were small and very self-reliant.
Another thing that H.T. invented early on, I think he patented it in 1893, was the Apollo exerciser. And I was fascinated when I found about this product some decades ago in my research, because it is a home exerciser. It's before we think about the various exercise machines we have to exercise at home today. He said it's for people of sedentary habits. So he said if you're a teacher or a preacher or a student or a bookkeeper, you need to exercise, because a healthy body creates a healthy mind. And it was an exercise machine that you would attach to the wall, and then it had straps and handles, and you would do exercises like this behind you or in front of you, and you could exercise in the home. And he was so far ahead of his time in producing something of that nature.
It was his engineering and inventive skills that made the company successful, plus his sales skills. He was a fantastic salesman. There's no question about that.
One other way that the company took advantage of public interest and fads, I guess you would say, in the country and around the world was through the use of brownies. And if you don't know what a brownie is, it is a fictional character from the folklore, mostly of Scotland, and they're like an elf. And in the folklore, it says that brownies lived in homes with humans, but they were very shy and didn't want to be seen, so they came out at night when everyone was asleep. And they would help do chores and clean the house and things of that nature, so they were well known. But in 1887, a book was written on the brownies and their story, and it was an immediate hit. These brownies from Scottish folklore became a hit in this country as well as in Europe. And Kingsbury knew what he was doing. He started putting brownies on his toys. So they were driving his vehicles, they were driving the wagons, and they were driving the various toys. And the public was very interested in that, and they bought the toys, again, partially for that reason. In the early 1900s, he was making many, many different cast iron toys. He was issuing catalogs of those, which went around the country. He soon held many patents on improvements to toys, and he sold some of the very first horseless carriage toys, because no one else was doing that yet. They were still selling wagons and horse-drawn fire engines.
So they literally went, of course, from the horse-drawn toys from Wilkins cast iron right into horseless, the transportation era. And again, they were so quick to, he was so quick to come up with a mechanical clockwork to simulate the workings of an automobile.
Kingsbury's was best known for their clockwork motor, which was patented, but it certainly wasn't the first clockwork motor. I'm sure that HT made some kind of improvement on it to allow them to patent it. And these, you would wind up and then your car or truck or whatever it was would drive across the floor.
It's very similar on every Kingsbury toy. It's on the rear of the toy, it's flat, you've seen them probably, you just simple wind. And just to show you how good they were, I mean, 80 years later, you can still wind one up and it works. So that tells you everything you want to know about how smart this man must have been.
After the turn of the century in 1900, they began to use sheet metal and pressed steel to produce these, which made sleeker products that looked more modern than the old cast iron, and it was the way the company went.
This must have been really exciting for a guy with that inventive type of mind. Where cast iron, it's a mold, it looks beautiful, but there it is.
The toys were models. They were reproductions of things that existed.
They started with the horse's carriage, then they went into the coupes, the open tours, the coupes, the tractors.
They had a cannon that fired. They had a submarine that submerged and came back up. They had propeller-driven boats. During the First World War, they had a little navy that you could send out in your bathtub or wherever you were. They had a sand elevator. You could crank it and the sand would come up to the top and then dump into your dump truck or concrete mixer. They had a steam shovel.
He was the first to use the rubber on the tires. You know, you can get a spoke wheel, which was popular then, but you could also get the disc wheel, and if you got the disc wheel, for a few cents more, you could get rubber, you know, vulcanized rubber on it. And, you know, he started to build a reputation. You couldn't wear these things out. I mean, here it is 80 years later, I was saying, you can't wear out the clockwork motor. Well, back then it was the same thing. So that meant they had a lasting property about them.
The factory was on Myrtle Street, so it was off from Water Street. The Kingsbury factory was there. That actually was where it began before he was involved.
Part of it was brick, which would make sense if they were doing castings there. And again, I don't know how much of their own casting they did, but certainly the early toys were all cast iron.
The company continued to grow right there on Myrtle Street, and as the company grew and modernized, the factory itself grew and modernized.
Some of the original toy factories still exist. You can go down Marlborough Street and see the big Kingsbury buildings. But if you walk around, you can see part of the original toy factory. There were two sons of HT, Edward and Chester.
E.J. Kingsbury was Harry's son, and he went to MIT. When he graduated, he came back to Keene and went to the company, which was thriving at that time. In 1916, he graduated.
He's a pretty serious guy. He wasn't particularly interested in toys, but he was very interested in manufacturing toys.
The company was having a problem with one of their pieces of manufacture, and some of the wheels were still cast iron, and the quality of the cast iron wasn't wonderful. Some of it was harder in some places and softer in some places, so it constantly broke the drill bits.
And that's expensive, and more importantly, it's time consuming because then you got to change the drill bit.
So he produced a variable speed friction drive drill that could drill through these and would slow down and speed up depending on how much of the tension was needed to get through the hard or the soft cast iron, and it worked wonderfully.
And it was so good that other people wanted to buy it, so they started selling this, and Kingsbury Machine Tool got going.
And one of their first large orders was from Henry Ford, who wanted something very similar, a friction-driven drill of the same kind.
So E.J. went and worked with the Machine Tool Company. He was the president, that was his baby. HT was around to help him. Chester eventually became president of the toy company.
And he worked on innovations and change and advertising on the toy side. And their sister also became a partner in the firm, so she was involved as well.
Back then, you have to think, okay, what would draw a child's imagination? Seeing a fire truck go down the street. We're going to do a fire truck. In fact, they did several different fire trucks. The ladder truck, the chemical truck. They seemed to know what was inside of a child's head. They really did. And it worked. And they put the same amount of detail in the large trucks. They even had a crank for the clockwork. The detail was incredible. When I look at one of those, I find it hard to believe that they could have made a profit, really, selling that toy, because that toy had as much detail probably as a regular American LaFrance. But they did, and that's what made them popular. They were really on top of their field.
Kingsbury and Wilkins sold their toys through stores and also directly to consumers.
He marketed them locally, of course, but he also did a great deal of advertising. The firm was well known for its national advertising.
Particularly the Kingsbury toys were advertised in magazines that children would read or their parents would read.
They had a sales office in New York City where these items were distributed from. They were manufactured in Keene, and many of them shipped to New York and distributed from there.
And shipping was usually more if it was west of the Mississippi. HT wrote the copy for the ads that went in the magazines and was very involved in the merchandising of his product. One of the biggest companies that supported Kingsbury was J.C. Penney. They sold Kingsbury toys under their own label, Little Jim. They also sold toys manufactured by other companies under the Little Jim label. So a Little Jim toy was not necessarily a Kingsbury toy, but a Kingsbury toy sold at J.C. Penney was always a Little Jim toy. They were fairly easy to distinguish. The big fire engines, for instance, would be a standard Kingsbury fire engine. The tires would say Kingsbury Toy Company, Keene, New Hampshire, and it would look pretty much indistinguishable from a regular fire engine, although there were often a few features that were just for J.C. Penney. But on the toy, there would be a decal that said Little Jim Toy. The smaller toys, like the Body by Fisher cars, would have orange wheels. So if you saw a Kingsbury toy with orange wheels, you didn't need to see the decal. You knew you had a J.C. Penney toy.
In the 1920s probably, he had a photo taken of 2 of his Kingsbury fire engines, and 5 of the workmen from the factory were standing on those to show how strong they were. And on one of the fire engines, a ladder truck I believe, 3 of the employees, who weighed a total of 655 pounds, were standing on the toy to show how strong it was, and then the advertising says that they climbed down and the toys worked perfectly and weren't injured in any way.
They had a great display, which was essentially a circle with sides on it, and they could wind up a car, put it in the circle, and it would just drive round and round and round with a big Kingsbury sign on the top of it. There's also a catalog, which is actually a flip movie. So you flip the catalog and you can watch the planes take up and fly. It's part of the same movie that has been captured and preserved. And then if you turn it over as you go through, you see the various Kingsbury toys for sale. And they sold these for a penny or a nickel.
He was clever enough to follow the public's interest in the transportation changes. People were interested in faster automobiles. As the cars grew bigger and faster, the public was fascinated by those, so he took advantage of that.
They stayed current with a sedan that now had a little rumble seat. It's like, well, Dad may have not been able to afford the real one, but you know, I can have one in miniature.
I believe the 300 series was your basic car. You went to the 400 series, you got lights. You went to the 500 series, you got a working radio, which was in fact a music box.
That had to be big, big time for a child. The colors they used, extraordinary array of colors.
If you were a store, you could order the cars in any of 11 colors or two-tone. So if you think about it, they had 11 colors of paint, and two-tone means 121 different two-tone cars. Plus the 11 solid cars, you get 132. That's an awful lot of options. So what would happen is the car would get dipped, and then it would go to the painters. The only picture I've seen of the painters were women who would sit there and paint the second color on the car. Or if it was a solid car, they would paint on the pinstriping. This was all done by hand. Kingsbury had a series in the late 20s and early 30s that were bodied by Fisher.
Some of their sedans, they actually had the little decal, you know, the Fisher bodies. They were allowed to use that. No one else was able to use that. The Fisher body was used on the real cars then. So that's how accurate Kingsbury was in duplicating the real-life car in a toy miniature. The most popular Kingsbury toys, I would think, are the Airflows, Chrysler Airflows.
Every year, when the car company put out a new model, Kingsbury put out a new model.
The Chrysler would actually come to Kingsbury and say, you know, we're going to put out this car, 1934 or whatever it was, whatever year, and we want you to duplicate it in a toy for them to get recognized by Chrysler as, well, this is the company we want. We've studied their toys, and here's the company we want to duplicate our real-life car. That's how they got a lot of these contracts.
As people became fascinated by airplanes and flying, he took advantage of that. Charles Lindbergh became extremely famous flying across the Atlantic Ocean. In 1927, he did a tour after his return around the country, showing off his airplane and earning lots of money, and HT said, we can take advantage of this. The public is fascinated by it. We will do a toy airplane. So they produced an airplane that looked much like the Spirit of St. Louis, and it was already on the market before Lindbergh started his tours.
They actually made two models of that. One was the transatlantic model, and that had a wind-up motor, and the other one didn't have a motor and was a bull toy for the smaller children. And that's actually a pretty rare toy. I've never seen one, but I'm looking.
So he was taking advantage of what the public was interested in and selling them the toys that they wanted.
And they put out the racer, you know, they put out the Major Seagraves had the racer, you know, broke the land speed record. They stayed current with that.
Henry Seagrave, an Englishman, came here to this country to try to break the land speed record, and they went to Daytona, where they had the wide open long stretches where he could try to break the speed record. And indeed, Seagrave accomplished that.
Kingsbury would produce a copy of every new land speed record holder, and they would try and get exclusive rights.
And HT realized again that people were fascinated by this. It was in the news, and he could sell model toys if he could produce those.
And so they built the Sunbeam, they built the Golden Arrow, and several other race cars, and these are prized by collectors. Some of them, like the Thunderbolt, are relatively rare, and some of them, like the Golden Arrow, are very common. They were all done by HT or EJ, except maybe the Thunderbolt. The Thunderbolt may be the only car that Chester actually designed. And as I say, it's a rare car, and it's a very nice car.
The toy company prospered for 50 years, and it was very successful. It was successful to the end. But when World War II began, the government and other manufacturers felt that probably they needed the manufacturing plants and the raw materials to go to the war effort. So the company actually in 1939 began to work with the government to produce some items for the upcoming war effort. And in 1942 they suspended toy manufacture.